Hello, world, and welcome to a brand new episode of Movie Night with Carlin Mill. Originally, the show was called No, what's gonna be? No, it originally was At the Movies with Carlin Mill. I almost messed myself up just now, but I changed it from At the Movies with Carlin Mill because At the Movies used to be an actual movie review show. I don't know if I don't know how old you are, or young you are, but if you're as old as me or even older, you remember there used to be a show called At the Movies that used to be on ABC that had Eben and Roper, and I don't want to get sued by those dudes. I don't know if the show is still on the air. I think it's probably in smaller cities or just online. I'm not sure what happened to At the Movie after was it Ebert that word? I think it's Ebert who died. But after Ebert left, the At the Movie series hasn't really been on. I mean, no, I'm lying. It still was on the air. It just, I guess, wasn't as entertaining after Roger Ebert passed away. I think Gene Siskel is the one who kept the show going, and in the beginning it was called Siskel and Ebert at the Movies, and then it became At the Movies with Ebert and Roper, and yeah, after Ebert died, which was in 2013. The show, I believe, kept going. I know it's in Canada. I know, I think it's still on the Reels Network. I'm not sure, but I know the for sure the series went on permanent hiatus in December 2011 due to lack of financial underwriting. And I really don't know how much it costs to just review movies on TV. But I know it's probably cheaper and way cheaper to do it on the internet, like I do it. But hey, to each his own. You know. So yeah, I believe that the 24 seasons of the national syndication of At the Movies ended with 2010 with Scott Pilgrim versus the World and Expendables. I remember that summer. That was a good summer. But it's not this summer. This summer has not been a good summer for summer blockbusters. As you know, every movie theater, majority of movie theaters, I should say, has been closed because of Corona. So I haven't been in a movie theater since, I would say, March of 2020 when I went to go see. The last films I saw was Bloodshot, The Hunt, and I think Sonic. Yeah, I believe Sonic. Those were the last couple of films I've seen in theaters. And since then, everything had to been stream on demand or premium on demand. I had to see Trolls 2 World Tour on Vimeo, not Vimeo, Vudu. Scoob, I had to see on Vudu. Right now it says Mulan, I'm going to have to see on Disney Plus. And instead of paying the usual price for Disney Plus, I'm going to have to actually pay $30 to see Mulan on Disney Plus. So it looks like this premium video on demand thing is going to be around for quite some time. I'm pretty sure Black Widow will be on its way in that same direction. And, it sucks not being able to go to the movies because you guys know me. I go to the movies at least 3 times a week, at least see 3 films. And, I've been devastated this summer. No blockbusters. I didn't get to see the new Fast and the Furious this year. It's taking a toll on me, but I always find a way to get my movie fix. So recently we had a drive-in theater. Oh, well, not even a theater, but they're having drive-in movies in some locations because of COVID. And I decided I have to go check one out because I've never been in a drive-in movie before. So I wanted to experience it for myself and see what was going on. So around my way, they have Movie in Your Car. And they're showing movies at your college near my way. Well, the parking lot at your college. And last weekend, they were showing Harlem Nights. Now, Harlem Nights is the 1989 American crime comedy drama written, executive produced, and directed by Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy co-stars with Richard Pryor, and they run a nightclub in the 1930s Harlem with, the usual gangsters and corrupt police officials. You got Danny Aiello, Red Fox, which was his last film before he died in 91, Della Reese, Charlie Murphy. It was, to me, an all-star film, all-star black film, like all your favorite black comedians around that time. Well, not all of them, but there's a good chunk of them in there. You know what I mean? No, well, I shouldn't even just say comedians because just black faces in general that you like. Robin Harris was in this movie. Jasmine Guy was in this movie. Arsenio Hall was in this movie. You got Thomas McKill Ford. Rest in peace, Tommy. You got so many people in this movie, and I gotta be honest with you. When I was a kid growing up to see this, I didn't find this movie entertaining at all. I didn't really find it interesting at all growing up. Mostly because at that age, one, I didn't, understand the underworld like that. Two, 1930s Harlem, I definitely did not know enough about. So, I watched the movie because I recognized the faces, but I guess I was amused, but I wasn't really entertained. I remember rewatching it. I first saw it maybe when I was maybe 10, 11, especially when Busta Rhymes did a parody of it in his Pesco Vassier video. Then I saw it again when I was 15 going on 16, and I still wasn't that interested in it. But I've been telling you guys, I've been devastated. I've been wanting to go to the movies. I wanted to see something, so I was like, you know what, let's go to the drive-in and go see Harlem Nights, because Harlem Nights is not on my top list of Eddie Murphy movies. It's not on my top list of black films. It's not on my top list of gangster films, crime dramas, crime comedies. It's not on any of those lists. But, I wanted to see it, and especially because Harlem Nights is the only directorial effort made by Eddie Murphy. He said he always wanted to direct and star in a period piece, and as well as work with Richard Pryor, who he considers the greatest influence in stand-up comedy. And, the movie, even though it was a financial success because it grossed $95 million against a $30 million budget, Paramount was like, nah, y'all failed. Y'all failed because it's not a $100 million movie like how you guys did with Coming to America or Beverly Hills Cops. Because Beverly Hills Cops 2 and Coming to America, those films were blockbusters when it came out. Coming to America was $36 million, and it made almost $350 million in theaters. And I believe Beverly Hills Cops was somewhere around $27 million, and that made $300 million. So the Paramount saw that what little measly old $95 million. It was like, bruh, that's not a success. What you talking about? And I'm sitting here like, bruh, $95 million is a lot of money. Especially if your budget was only $30 million. But they wasn't with it. But I went to go see the movie in the drive-in, and not even surprisingly, I'm not even shocked about this, I found more stuff from this film that I didn't pick up when I was a kid. There were jokes where I was starting to understand them a lot better. The story I was able to understand all the way through. I still don't like the slow pacing, and I feel like I still don't believe the movie is Eddie Murphy's funniest. It's not the funniest Eddie Murphy movie to me at all. But I enjoyed it a lot better than I've ever did before. I'm not gonna lie, And I don't know why the movie didn't do well back in the day. All these faces there, you would have thought this would have been a blockbuster hit as well as the last ones, Maybe it could be the fact back in November 17, 1989, there were two men who were shot and killed inside of an AMC theater in Detroit when they were showing this movie in the suburb of Michigan, I believe, or Southfield, Michigan. According to an eyewitness that was quoted in the Detroit Free Press, the shooting happened on opening night, during a shooting spree that happened in the film's opening. A 22-year-old woman panicked, ran into traffic, and was critical condition 2 days after in Providence Hospital, but the police named her name. And less than an hour after the shooting, the police arrived to the theater to find a 24-year-old man who he had shot at an officer, and the gunman was wounded when the police shot at him back in the theater parking lot. The incident caused the theater chain to cancel showings of Harlem Night, and it's messed up because I'm pretty sure there was a lot of people there, and they just stopped the movie. I heard they stopped the movie 3 times, And from what I've heard, there were people fighting in Sacramento that was showing the movie. And apparently that fighting went into the parking lot, and that ended with gunshots where two 24-year-old men were seriously injured. And then I think another person an hour later was shot in Richmond, California, seeing the same movie. And the police stopped the projection of Harlem Nights just trying to find a suspect. And, it was like a whole hour riot that went down. And it was just like, I hear stories all the time where they're like, oh, people were shooting up during Boys in the Hood or Men's in Society. I definitely did not expect Harlem Nights to be one of those films where people were just shooting up in the theaters. People were blaming the movie. They're like, oh, it glorified violence. But I've seen that movie. That movie's not that violent. I've seen some more violent movies. That movie is not violent at all. You know what I mean? But it would explain why the theaters around my way growing up in the 90s had metal detectors. If you're from Southside Jamaica, Queens, or somewhere between Valley Stream and Rosedale, and you went to the Green Acre Theaters or the Sunrise Theater, you got to remember the metal detectors. Those metal detectors were in there all the time. I thought it was normal until I went to another theater and saw, wait, you guys don't have metal detectors here? But that's another story. So anyways, like I said, I enjoyed the drive-in movie theater experience. It was very new to me. I had to get in there. I didn't know what was the radio station to listen to the movie itself, so I had to try to find a station. It was cool to see all these other cars there. Everybody was enjoying the movie from their car. You still get the light coming from the projector onto the big screen. So it still feels like the movie experience. The only difference is you're in your car. And granted, I do watch a lot of movies in my car on my phone. Hook it up to the Bluetooth, just watch it on my phone. Is it the same thing? Close. The only difference is on a bigger screen and there's more people there. But I think I definitely want to do more drive-in movies this summer. I really do. And it looks like the movie theater are not going to open anytime soon. So why not? So it's either go to the drive-in or get movies that are now released online that go straight to streaming or straight to digital, or straight to download. Now, speaking of movies that is straight to download, straight to digital, straight to whatever you want to call it, I just saw a film today called The Tax Collector. Now, I saw the trailer maybe a month or two ago, but, I was just like, let me wait till I see the film before I say anything about it. So, The Tax Collector is the 2020 American action thriller film written, directed, and produced by David Ayer. David Ayer was the writer of Training Day. He also directed films like Suicide Squad. He also did, Street Kings, Bright, Sabotage. He's done a lot of these, dark cop movies. What was that other one he did? Fury, End of Watch, Harsh Times. I believe he was the writer on SWAT and Fast and Furious and Taking Lives. But this one, this film pretty much feels just like any of those films I just mentioned. I realize that David Ayer really makes the same film over and over, just with just a little different flavor. Most of his films basically look like Training Day. Just Training Day from a different perspective, from different perspectives of the streets of L.A. You know what I mean? Whether it's Street Kings, whether it's Bright, whether it's End of Watch, or even now here we are with The Tax Collector. It just feels like he's just really good at making gritty Los Angeles films, and I don't mind it. I do love his brand of gritty Los Angeles movies. I noticed he also recast the same people from Training Day all over and over, but that's beside the point. So this film was shot back in 2018. I believe it has I think maybe 4 production companies that was working with it. None of the big ones, whether like Disney or WB or any of these guys. You had Cross Street Pictures, Set Apart Entertainment, Eyewood Studios, Atwater Capital. Not the hugest names when you think of film productions, but they out here. And it was distributed by RLJE Films, or RLJ Entertainment. That's the company that was, it was founded, the parent, by Robert L. Johnson, the guy who co-founded BET, but he ended up selling it to Viacom in 2001. But this is his new production distribution company, and they distribute a lot of stuff. I got nothing bad to say about these guys. They do distribute a lot of stuff, but I don't know, when it comes to these type of movies, when they go straight to video, I get worried, because it's like, okay, it's not a studio behind it, the independent joint. Sort of, because when you got celebrities and big name directors, people don't really look at it as independent. But technically, it's independent. I'm pretty sure this had a low budget, maybe not the lowest of the low budget, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't like, I'm sure it was a step down from the Suicide Squad for David Ayer. But it was. I don't know how to describe The Tax Collector. So the film stars Bobby Soto, George Lopez, and Shia LaBeouf. The film follows 2 tax collectors working for a Los Angeles crime lord whose business becomes, basically it starts falling apart when the old rival returns back to Los Angeles from Mexico. So I like the movie. I don't hate it. I don't know. Something about it just feels like it's missing something. You know what I mean? Like, because I've seen low budget movies, not low budget, but not up there. And I've seen movies that's like somewhere between the $4 to $5 million budget. That's that takes place within a small community. Especially if it's like the Mexican community. Like one of my favorite movies I saw last year was El Chiquino. El Chiquino to me was one of the best slept on movies of last year. Now I'm not of Latino descent. I am of Haitian descent, and Haitians definitely have a lot of Afro-Latino culture embedded in it. We got to make sure a whole bunch of African, Latino, French, all roll up in one. So I tend to, gravitate to things that's related to my culture. But the thing is, this movie just felt like it was. I don't want to say it wasn't authentic, because it definitely had some it definitely had some moments that felt authentic, but there was moments where it also felt diluted. Moments where the pacing felt off. A lot of people were complaining about Shia LaBeouf. They say he was being in brownface, and even though he wasn't in literal brownface, they felt like he was in brownface as an actor, pretending to be a Chicano or a Vato. I don't know what you guys call yourself out there. I'm sorry if I disrespected anybody, but I didn't think he was in brownface. According to David Ayer, he's the character he's playing is a white guy who grew up in the hood, so he's just a Jewish guy playing a white guy. He's not playing a Spanish guy. I'm sure he does speak in the slang of the streets, of the hood of Los Angeles. All right, but I don't feel like he was in brownface. I don't know, but I don't think I have that right to say whether he was in brownface or not, because I'm not brown. So maybe y'all take my word for it, but I don't feel like he was in brownface. A lot of the cast of that movie said Shia LaBeouf wasn't in brownface. People would say, "Oh, look at his haircut. Look at all the tattoos that he got for this movie." That's the culture. That is the culture. What can I say? I don't know, but I feel like there definitely wasn't enough action in between. There was definitely a lot of dialogue. And the action started showing up slowly at the end of the movie, but I felt like there should have been a lot more action in the beginning. There was a lot of, character building, and there wasn't enough character development though. You know what I mean? Like there was bits and pieces of it, but it still felt like it felt flat a little bit in certain scenes. Now I don't hate it, but it's not something where I'm like, oh man, everybody got to see this movie. Like El Chiquino, I left out saying, oh, everybody got to watch El Chiquino. This is the movie right here. This thing is fire. This one, I'm just like, if you're bored, you want to see Shia LaBeouf play a gangster in Los Angeles, you want to see some movies or some with some Latinos, then hey, this movie might be for you. But if you're looking for something that's like, that's gonna have you think about it all weekend long, that's not it. I've gotten more recently out of the Danny Trejo documentary, Inmate Number 1, than I've gotten from this film. You know what I mean? Like I don't hate it, but I'm not in love with it either. I wish there was more action. I wish there was more character development. I feel like this could have worked better as a series. Like this could have been a great Netflix series, but this feels like a Netflix original film. And not all Netflix original films are on point. They have all of the pieces, but it's just like it's fast food. It's like, here, take it and eat, go. And it's all right. If you're looking for a movie to watch, you're looking to be entertained. You want to see some brutal violence, because there's definitely some brutal violence in this movie. Then the tax collector's for you, but I definitely think it could have been better. But that's what this episode of At the Movies, is now. Colin Mill Movie Night with Colin Mill. I will be doing more soon. We're going to drop some videos of all the previous times we were at the movie in the last 2 years, since, all the movie theaters are closed now. So I want to share all my movie experience with you guys and, help you guys reminisce on the good days when you actually walk into a theater and enjoy it. But until next time, much love, God bless. 2 pieces of chicken grease. I'll see you later.